Hi there, Mr. Mayo here, and it's time for another practice tip. Today we're going to talk about fundamentals. So it never fails. We're in the band room, everyone's coming in, setting up their instruments, putting their music on the stand, putting that pencil that they always bring to class on the stand, and then we begin an individual warm-up. And some people do what they're supposed to do, where they're really focusing on the fundamental skills that we built in class. And then there's the other people that play literature or the latest pop tune. What those people don't realize is they're really inhibiting themselves. What the purpose of a warm-up and fundamentals program is to get the air and the muscles moving properly for instrument performance. In this video, we're going to talk about fundamentals and how to use them to your advantage. So when a marathon runner's going to run a marathon, they don't just wake up, get out of bed, and start running. They build into it. They work up. They set up a fundamentals program where they're periodically over a time building up the amount of time that they're running. They're also looking at how they eat, how they hydrate themselves, and they make sure they stretch adequately beforehand. The key is they have a fundamentals program. And it's the same way for music too. The top musicians out there have a fundamentals program. In fact, if they only have a few minutes to practice every day, they're going to practice the fundamentals, and they recommend the same thing for everyone else out there. So a side note, most of the top musicians out there work on breathing and stretching before they play their instrument. The purpose of this video isn't really to talk about breathing and stretching. We're more going to be focused on the fundamentals of actually performing. So while that stuff is important, we're not focused on it today. So what should a fundamentals program consist of? For winds, it consists of things like long tones, scales, arpeggios, interval studies, fingering technique exercises, lip slurs, dynamic studies, articulation studies, chorales, the list can go on and on. For percussionists, it's a lot of the same material as winds, plus they might have things like rudiments, hand transition exercises, and roll exercises. There's a lot that can be covered in your fundamentals program, and it can change from day to day, and it can change over time. There's an unlimited amount of exercises out there for every instrument. It may seem like a lot, but there's a very structured way of how you should really look at your fundamentals program that can be structured towards your advantage. The biggest thing is to look at your literature and how your fundamentals program can help the music that you're playing. So to show an example of this, I'm going to talk about a marching band competition. If you ever go to a marching band competition and just stand in the parking lot and watch the groups warm up, you'll notice a lot of things. There's going to be the drum line that's standing out there, who their warm-up process is going to be playing their show top to bottom over and over and over again, barely working on anything in between. And they might be right across from the drum line that's trying to play the exercises that the top drum and bugle corps play. Then when you go listen to the wind sections, you're going to hear a band that's trying to play 30 exercises that they think is going to assist them. And they're going to be right next to the band that's trying to play a chorale that not everybody really has memorized, that isn't in their show in any way, shape, or form. But the interesting thing is, if you look at the groups that are really successful, they tend to only have a few exercises, and they tend to be focused on the parts of their show that give them problems. And those exercises, if you pay attention to it, will help them in certain aspects towards their show, instead of not having a reasoning behind what they're doing. They focus on the fundamentals. So when we sit down to practice, we should be focused on the fundamentals too. For instance, if your focus today is going to be a lyrical etude, then what you need to be focusing on is fundamentals that are going to assist you towards that lyrical etude. Stuff like long tones, articulation studies that are focused on more legato, dynamic exercises, and really focusing on your intonation. For percussionists, this also might be different roll speeds that you're doing and a legato stroke, such as the legato stroke on timpani. If we're focused on something more articulate and faster, we might be wanting to focus on long tones, articulation studies, scale studies, arpeggio studies, stuff like that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to fundamentals. You can use a lot of the exercises you probably already have towards what you're wanting to do. For instance, if you have a long tone exercise that you normally play every day, you can put crescendos and decrescendos in it in order to make it actually a dynamic exercise. If there's certain scales you play every day, you could put certain articulations like slurs, staccatos, accents, and marcatos in different spots to create an articulation study. Remember the number one rule though, everything you play is a tone study. Don't forget that. Tone always is so important. I also think it's important to look at specific exercises on your instrument. Each instrument's different and unique, which is what makes it beautiful, but they also have their own challenges. So where flutes might want to spend some time focusing on maybe harmonic studies, clarinets might be wanting to focus on things like going over the break. Brass might be wanting to focus on lip slurs, and percussionists might be wanting to focus on different roll techniques. There's just a lot of specific things. When it comes to instrument-specific principles, I would make sure I have a good fundamental book. Then I would go through and maybe look at one or two of those exercises each week, focusing on those exercises for an entire week before I move on to something else. That way, over time, I'm gradually building my repertoire of exercises towards my instrument. If you have a private lesson instructor, you can ask them what specific studies, exercises, and fundamentals you can work towards that will assist you in playing on your instrument, as well as the literature that you're playing. If not, ask a band director. Send a message to me. So how to decide what to warm up with? Look at what you're playing and identify what you need to play it well. Often I like to look at the hard aspects of my music and make sure I tailor my fundamentals towards that. So for instance, if I'm having problems with a scale-like passage in something that I'm playing, then I might want to identify what scale or scales it consists of and make sure in my fundamentals I hit those scales, variations of those scales, and find some exercises or create exercises towards those scales where it might go up and down at different points, just really solidifying the fingering or the strokes as I'm going through playing that scale. The same is true with arpeggios. I would want to identify the arpeggio and go on from there in the same manner. If it's a specific interval, then I might want to identify the interval and find some interval studies that will go up and down the scale that will assist me towards that. Often I find when we have a problem with a section, we can just break it down to those fundamentals to really build on it. How are you working in your fundamentals towards your problem spots? Have you found exercises or created exercises that will assist you? Can you use what you already have in your fundamentals program in a way to help you develop those problems? Design your fundamentals around what you are playing. Now, there are certain fundamental skills you're going to hit every day. I guarantee you're going to hit long tones every day because long tones consist of everything you need. At the introduction of a note, the tone in between, and a release. Every note you play has those three fundamentals, so you should hit long tones every day. You're probably going to hit your scales every day. You're probably going to hit your arpeggios. You're going to hit some fundamental approach of just about everything we've already talked about. But something I think a lot of people don't think about is for winds and percussionists, that scales, arpeggios, and intervals, meaning the spaces between different notes, are in everything that we play. So if you know your scales and arpeggios, it's going to help you out so much in performance. If you memorize them, get them ingrained, and know how to play them throughout the register of your instrument, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So think about your fundamentals, how they relate to your music, how you can build your scales, arpeggios, different intervals, and different aspects of your playing into your fundamental program in order to assist you with your playing. Hope you enjoyed this fundamental video. Please feel free to subscribe for future videos. Be safe and go practice.